Marcus Chin sat in the pristine waiting room of Galactic Solutions Incorporated, adjusting his tie for the third time. The chrome walls reflected his nervous face back at him, making his old battle scars more visible than he'd like. Around him, other job applicants chatted in various alien languages, clicks, whistles, and harmonious tones that his translation device struggled to keep up with. At 42, Marcus had spent 20 years in Earth's military, fighting in 3 different wars across the galaxy. He'd led squads through impossible situations, solved problems that had stumped entire command structures, and earned more medals than he cared to count. But now, sitting among these perfectly groomed aliens with their advanced degrees and spotless records, he felt like a relic from a more primitive time. The receptionist, a tall Zephyrian with silver skin and, for arms, called his name with a musical voice. Marcus stood up, straightened his shoulders, and walked into the interview room. 3 aliens sat behind a curved desk that seemed to float in midair. Dr. Vexhai, an insectoid Krillian with compound eyes, tapped her claws impatiently on the desk surface. Beside her, Engineer Bolthera, a massive rock-like Goronite, rumbled something under his breath. The third interviewer, Administrator Sylvan, a graceful Etherian with flowing tentacles for hair, smiled politely. Mr. Chun, Dr. Vexhai began, her mandibles clicking with each word. Your military record is extensive, but I'm afraid we're looking for someone with more technical qualifications for this security position. Marcus had heard this before. 3 other companies had said the same thing this week. I understand your concerns, but my experience, 19 years of combat. Engineer Bolthera interrupted, his voice like grinding stone. No advanced degrees in xenobiology, quantum mechanics, or galactic law. This position requires someone who can think, not just fight. The word stung, but Marcus kept his expression neutral. With respect, sir, combat taught me to think under pressure. Every battle was a puzzle that needed solving, often with incomplete information, and lives on the line. Administrator Sylvan's tentacles swayed gently. Mr. Chun, we appreciate your service to Earth, but our clients expect sophisticated solutions to complex problems. They need someone who understands the nuances of interspecies relations, not someone whose first instinct is violence. I never said violence was my first instinct, Marcus replied calmly. In fact, my record shows I prevented more conflicts than I participated in. Diplomacy was often more effective than firepower. Dr. Vexhai's compound eyes glittered with amusement. Diplomacy? From a human soldier? That's almost amusing. Marcus felt his jaw clench, but maintained his composure. The interview continued for another 20 minutes, with each question designed to highlight his lack of formal education or civilian experience. They asked about quantum encryption protocols he'd never studied, about trade agreements he'd never negotiated, about cultural practices of species he'd only encountered in battle. As the interview concluded, Marcus could see the decision in their eyes before they spoke. Thank you for your time, Mr. Chun, Administrator Sylvan said with practiced politeness. We'll be in touch. Walking back through the waiting room, Marcus noticed the same Zephyrian receptionist looking troubled. She was speaking rapidly into a communication device, her 4 hands gesturing frantically. As he approached the exit, she caught his eye and quickly looked away, but not before he saw genuine fear in her expression. Marcus paused at the door. Something was wrong. His military instincts, honed by years of reading situations and people, screamed that danger was present. The receptionist's behavior, the way security guards were positioning themselves near the exits, the subtle tension in the air, it all pointed to a developing crisis. He walked back to the receptionist's desk. Excuse me, he said quietly. Is everything all right? She looked up at him with wide, silver eyes. I cannot, the protocols say. Listen, Marcus said, lowering his voice. I know when something's wrong. Marcus studied the building schematics on the receptionist's holographic display. The high-security wing was 3 floors up, accessible only through 2 heavily reinforced checkpoints and a series of quantum-locked doors. According to the security feed, a Vraxian mercenary had somehow bypassed all the safeguards and cornered Dr. Yilessa, Professor Mordun, and Research Assistant Kala in Laboratory 7. How did he get past your security? Marcus asked, noting the sophisticated defense systems. The Zephyrian receptionist, who had introduced herself as Lyra Nin, pulled up additional screens. That's what's so disturbing. Our systems show no signs of forced entry, no alarms triggered, no security protocols breached. It's as if he simply appeared inside. Marcus frowned. In his experience, the impossible usually had a very simple explanation that everyone overlooked. Who has access to that wing? Only Level 9 clearance personnel, Lyra Nin replied. 12 individuals total, including the 3 hostages. Show me the access logs for the past week. Lyra Nin's 4 hands danced across the holographic controls, bringing up a complex timeline of entries and exits. Marcus studied it carefully, his military training kicking in. Pattern recognition had saved his life more times than he could count. There, he said, pointing to a specific entry. Dr. Felnox accessed the wing yesterday at 0347 hours. That's unusual timing for research work. Dr. Felnox is one of our most trusted scientists, Lyra Nin protested. He's been with the company for 8 years. Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones in the best position to betray us, Marcus said grimly. I need to talk to whoever's handling this crisis. 20 minutes later, Marcus found himself in the building's security center, facing Commander Thexal, a stern Valdorian with rigid posture and crystal blue skin. The commander's elongated head fins flared with irritation as he looked Marcus up and down. You are the human soldier, Commander Thexal said dismissively. Lyra Nin mentioned you wanted to help, but this is a matter for trained professionals. I am a trained professional, Marcus replied. 20 years of experience dealing with hostage situations, including several involving non-human combatants. Commander Thexal's fins flattened against his skull, a sign of skepticism in Valdorian culture. This Vraxian is not some primitive insurgent. Vraxians are known for their cunning and their technology. He's threatening to activate a quantum destabilizer if we approach. Such a device could collapse the molecular structure of the entire floor. Marcus studied the security monitors showing the laboratory. The Vraxian hostage-taker was a tall, reptilian humanoid with dark scales and glowing red eyes. He paced back and forth, keeping the 3 researchers huddled in one corner while maintaining a position that gave him clear sight lines to all entrances. What are his demands? Marcus asked. He wants to speak with CEO Malthurin about something called Project Nightfall, Commander Thexal explained. But Malthurin is attending the Galactic Trade Summit on Kepler Station. He cannot return for at least 6 hours. Marcus noticed something on the monitors. Commander, look at the hostage-taker's equipment. That's not a quantum destabilizer. How could you possibly know that? Commander Thexal demanded. Because I've seen real quantum destabilizers. They're the size of briefcases and require a specialized power source. What he's holding looks like a modified plasma cutter with some jury-rigged components. Dangerous, yes, but not capable of molecular collapse. Commander Thexal studied the device more closely, his fins beginning to rise again. Even if you're correct, approaching him is still extremely dangerous. I'm not suggesting a frontal assault, Marcus said. But there are other ways to handle this situation. First, we need to understand what Project Nightfall is and why this Vraxian is willing to risk everything to expose it. Lyra Nin's voice came through the communication system. I found something. Project Nightfall appears in our classified research database, but the files are locked under executive-level security. Marcus turned to Commander Thexal. Can you override that security? Not without authorization from Commander, Marcus interrupted. 3 lives are at stake. Sometimes you have to break protocol to save people. For a moment, the Valdorian's training warred with his conscience. Finally, his fins drooped in resignation. Computer, emergency override authorization Thex L77 Alpha. Display Project Nightfall files. The main screen filled with technical diagrams and research notes. As Commander Thexal stared at Marcus with disbelief. You want to voluntarily enter a room with an armed and dangerous Vraxian? That's suicide. Maybe, Marcus replied, studying the monitor feeds again. But look at his body language. He's not acting like a terrorist or a madman. He's desperate, yes, but there's purpose in his movements. He's trying to protect something or someone. Marcus had learned to read alien body language during his years of military service. The Vraxian's tail movements, The way he positioned his head, the careful distance he maintained from the hostages, it all suggested someone trying to minimize harm while achieving a specific goal. Even if your assessment is correct, Commander Thexal said, regulations require. Regulations didn't account for genocide research happening in a civilian facility. Marcus interrupted. Commander, I've been in situations like this before. Sometimes the only way forward is to break the rules. Lyranin's voice crackled through the intercom again. Sirs, I'm receiving reports that Dr. Felnox left the building 2 hours ago, shortly after the hostage situation began. His transport departed for an unknown destination. Marcus and Commander Thexal exchanged glances. The timing was too convenient to be coincidental. Commander, patch me through to the laboratory, Marcus said. I want to talk to our Vraxian friend. After a moment of hesitation, Commander Thexal activated the communication link. Marcus took a deep breath and leaned toward the microphone. This is Marcus Chun. I'm not security, not military, just someone who's seen enough wars to recognize when someone's fighting for the right reasons. The Vraxian on the monitor stopped pacing and looked directly at the camera. When he spoke, his voice was deep and measured, with the slight hiss common to his species. Human Marcus Chun, you speak of right reasons. Do you know what your corporation has been developing in these laboratories? I'm not employed by this corporation, Marcus replied. I was here for a job interview, which didn't go well. But, yes, I know about Project Nightfall. I know about the bioweapon targeting your species and others. The Vraxian's eyes widened slightly. You know of Nightfall? Then, you understand why I cannot allow this knowledge to remain hidden. I understand, Marcus said carefully. But, taking hostages isn't going to solve this problem. It's only going to make you look like the bad guy when the story breaks. There will be no story, the Vraxian replied bitterly. Dr. Felnox and his associates have too much influence, too many connections. They will make this disappear, just as they have made other inconvenient truths disappear. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What other truths? I am Kethvar, son of scientist Velnara of the Vraxian Research Institute. 3 months ago, my mother discovered evidence of illegal experimentation on captured Vraxian civilians. When she tried to report it through official channels, she was found dead in her laboratory, apparently a victim of equipment malfunction. Commander Thexal's fins drooped. If Kethvar was telling the truth, this was bigger than just unauthorized weapons research. Kethvar, Marcus said gently, I believe you. But this isn't the way to get justice for your mother. Let me help you do this right. Help? Kethvar's laugh was harsh. You are human. Your species has no love for mine. Why would you help? Marcus thought about his answer carefully. Because 20 years ago, I was fighting alongside a Vraxian unit against the hegemony forces on Kepler 7. When my squad got pinned down by enemy fire, a Vraxian named Desicator carried me 3 kilometers through hostile territory to get me medical attention. He saved my life, and he died doing it. The laboratory fell silent. Kethvar stared at the camera for a long moment. You knew Desicator? I knew him, Marcus confirmed. He was brave, honorable, and he believed in protecting the innocent. I think you're trying to do the same thing he did, but there's a better way. What way? Kethvar asked, his voice softer now. Marcus looked at Commander Thexal, then back at the screen. We expose everything. Not just Project Nightfall, but all of it. The illegal experiments, your mother's death, Dr. Felnox's connections, everything. But we do it legally, with evidence that can't be dismissed or covered up. The authorities will not listen. Some of them will. Marcus interrupted. Commander Thexal here has already broken protocol to help uncover the truth. Lyranin risked her job to show me classified files. There are good people in every species, Kethvar. We just have to find them and give them the evidence they need. Kethvar was quiet for several minutes, obviously wrestling with the decision. Finally, he spoke again. If I surrender, how do I know you will keep your promise? How do I know this won't be buried like my mother's death? Marcus had been thinking about this problem. Because I'm going to make sure it gets to someone who can't be bought or silenced. I have contacts in the Galactic Military Justice Division, people I served with who now work in investigating war crimes. They have jurisdiction over weapons of mass destruction cases. You would risk your own safety to help a stranger? I would risk my safety to prevent genocide, Marcus replied firmly. The laboratory doors hissed open as Marcus walked in alone, his hands visible and empty. Kethvar stood near the far wall, his improvised weapon placed on a nearby workbench. The three hostages, Dr. Yelesa, Professor Mordun, and research assistant Kala, huddled together, looking frightened but unharmed. "Are you hurt?" Marcus asked the researchers. Dr. Yelesa, a slender Altarian with pale blue skin, shook her head. "He never threatened us directly. He just said we couldn't leave until his message was delivered." Marcus nodded and turned to Kethvar. Up close, the Vraxian was younger than he'd appeared on the monitors, probably no older than 25 in human years. His scales showed the stress patterns typical of his species when under extreme emotional pressure. "Thank you for trusting me," Marcus said. "Now we need to work fast. Dr. Felnox has a head start, and people like him have ways of making evidence disappear." Kethvar reached into his clothing and withdrew a small data crystal. "This contains copies of all the Project Nightfall files, plus additional evidence of the illegal experiments. My mother managed to hide it before she died." Marcus took the crystal, feeling its weight both physically and morally. "This is good, but we need more. We need to trace the command structure, find out who else was involved." Professor Mordun, an elderly Crystarian whose transparent body showed his nervous system flashing with anxiety, spoke up hesitantly. I might know something about that." Everyone turned to look at him. The professor's internal light patterns flickered more rapidly as he struggled with his decision. "Dr. Felnox approached me 6 months ago," Professor Mordun continued. "He wanted to use my research on genetic markers for what he called defensive applications. I refused, but I overheard him talking to Administrator Sylvain about finding alternative sources for the information." Marcus felt pieces clicking into place. Administrator Sylvain? She was one of my interviewers earlier. Administrator Sylvain has access to personnel files for every species that works here, Dr. Yelesa added. She would know the genetic information they needed for their bioweapon. Kethvar's eyes blazed with anger. "She was involved in my mother's death?" "We don't know that yet," Marcus said calmly. "But we're going to find out." Commander Thexal's voice came through Marcus's communicator. "Marcus, I have news. We've tracked Dr. Felnox's transport. It's heading for the neutral zone station Epsilon 9, where he'll be beyond our jurisdiction." Marcus thought quickly. Epsilon 9 was a notorious haven for criminals and corporate executives trying to avoid legal consequences. Once Felnox reached it, extracting him would be nearly impossible. "How long until he arrives?" Marcus asked. "Approximately 4 hours." Marcus looked around the laboratory, his mind racing. He needed evidence that would hold up in a galactic court, and he needed it before Felnox could disappear into the lawless regions of space. "Professor Mordun, you said you refused to help with the genetic research. Do you have records of that conversation?" "Yes, I keep detailed logs of all my interactions," the professor replied. "It's a Crystarian habit. We document everything." "Dr. Yelesa, you work in this facility. You must have noticed irregularities, unusual research requests, budget allocations that didn't make sense." The Altarian nodded slowly. "There were several instances where equipment was ordered for projects that didn't exist in our official database. I reported it to Administrator Sylvain, but she said it was classified research." Marcus was building a picture of the conspiracy, but he needed something more concrete. "Kethvar, your mother's research. Do you have copies of her original findings?" "Some," Kethvar replied. "But the most damaging evidence was destroyed when they sabotaged her laboratory." "Maybe not completely destroyed," research assistant Kala spoke for the first time. She was young, probably fresh out of university, with the distinctive golden fur of a Felinian. "I work in data recovery. When equipment fails, sometimes fragments of information survive in backup systems." Marcus felt a spark of hope. "Could you recover your mother's research, Kethvar? If we could prove that Felnox and his associates killed her to cover up their crimes. It would be murder, not just corporate malfeasance," Commander Thexal's voice confirmed through the communicator. "Murder carries universal jurisdiction. We could pursue them anywhere in the galaxy." Kala stepped forward eagerly. "I can access the main data storage systems from here. If there are backup fragments from Dr. Velnara's laboratory, I can reconstruct them." "Do it," Marcus said. "But be careful. If Administrator Sylvain is involved, she might have ways of monitoring our activities. As Kala began working at one of the laboratory terminals, Marcus turned to the others. We need to assume that Sylvain and possibly other executives are trying to cover their tracks. They'll want to eliminate any evidence, which means they might consider us threats. Professor Mordun's light patterns flickered with fear. Are you saying they might try to kill us? I'm saying we need to be prepared for anything, Marcus replied. Commander Thexal, are there other security personnel you trust completely? A few, came the reply. But if this conspiracy involves high-level executives, I cannot be certain who else might be compromised. Marcus nodded grimly. This was the part of the mission where everything could go wrong very quickly. In his military experience, the most dangerous moments came when the enemy realized they were trapped and had nothing left to lose. Kethvar, he said, I want you to know that whatever happens next, you did the right thing. Your mother would be proud. The young Vraxian's scales shifted to a darker hue, a sign of deep emotion in his species. Thank you, Marcus-chun. Esikator spoke of you before he died. He said you were someone who understood that honor transcends species. Found something, Kala exclaimed suddenly. There are definitely backup fragments from Dr. Velnara's research. The data was corrupted, but not completely destroyed. Give me another hour, and I can reconstruct most of it. Marcus's instincts proved correct when the laboratory's lights suddenly dimmed and the security doors began sealing automatically. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the room as everyone looked around in alarm. Commander Thexal, are you seeing this? Marcus spoke into his communicator, but received only static in response. Dr. Yelesa checked the door controls. We're locked in. Someone has activated emergency containment protocols. Kala looked up from her terminal, her golden fur standing on end with fear. The data recovery is almost complete, but someone is trying to remotely wipe the backup systems. I'm fighting them for control. Marcus examined the sealed doors, his military training kicking in. These protocols are designed to contain dangerous biological agents. If someone triggers them, the next step is usually atmospheric purging. Professor Mordun's internal light patterns flashed in panic. They mean to kill us all and destroy the evidence. Kethvar moved to stand beside Marcus, his earlier hostility replaced by grim determination. What do we do? Marcus studied the laboratory layout, looking for alternative exits. Professor Mordun, you said Crystarians document everything. Do you have building schematics in your files? The professor's transparent form brightened as he accessed his personal database. Yes, here. This laboratory has an emergency escape route through the ventilation system, but it requires manual override. Where? Marcus asked urgently. The access panel is behind that equipment stack, but it's designed to open from the outside during emergencies. Marcus grabbed a plasma cutter from a nearby workbench. Sometimes you have to make your own emergencies. As he began cutting through the access panel, Kala called out desperately. I've recovered about 70% of Dr. Velnara's research, but they're winning the data war. In another few minutes, everything will be wiped. Can you transfer what you have to a portable device? Marcus asked, still cutting. Already doing it, Kala replied, her fingers flying across the controls. The access panel fell away, revealing a narrow maintenance shaft. Marcus looked at the others, a young Vraxian, an elderly Crystarian, a slender Altarian, and a small Felinian. None of them were built for physical escape routes. I'll go first and secure the other end, he said. Kethvar, you're the strongest. Help the others through. As Marcus crawled into the shaft, he heard Dr. Yelesa gasp behind him. The atmospheric systems are activating. We have maybe 10 minutes before the air becomes toxic. Marcus moved as quickly as he could through the cramped space, his muscles protesting from years of accumulated injuries. Behind him, he could hear the others following, with Kethvar encouraging them in his steady voice. The shaft led to a maintenance room 3 corridors away from the laboratory. Marcus kicked out the access grate and dropped to the floor, immediately checking for threats. The corridor was empty, but he could hear security alarms throughout the building. One by one, the others emerged from the shaft. Kala clutched a data pad containing the recovered research, while Professor Mordun supported Dr. Yelesa, who was showing signs of respiratory distress from the stress. Commander Thexal's security station is 2 floors down, Marcus said. If we can reach him, you won't be reaching anyone, a cold voice interrupted. Administrator Sylvain stepped into view at the end of the corridor, flanked by two security guards Marcus didn't recognize. Her tentacle hair writhed with what might have been anger or fear. Administrator Sylvain, Dr. Yilessa said in shock. What's happening? Why are the emergency protocols active? A necessary precaution, Sylvain replied smoothly. There's been a biological containment breach. I'm afraid you'll all need to be quarantined until we can determine the extent of the contamination. Marcus stepped protectively in front of the group. There's no contamination, and you know it. You're trying to destroy evidence of Project Nightfall. Sylvain's expression didn't change. I don't know what you're talking about. Mr. Chun, you were scheduled to leave the building hours ago. Your presence here is already suspicious. My presence here uncovered a conspiracy to commit genocide, Marcus replied firmly. We have evidence of illegal bioweapon research and murder. Evidence that will sadly be lost in the unfortunate accident that's about to occur, Sylvain said. A tragic equipment failure in the high-security laboratory. One of the security guards raised a weapon, but Kethvar moved with the lightning reflexes of his species, tackling the guard before he could fire. The weapon discharged harmlessly into the ceiling. Marcus lunged forward, using moves he'd learned in hand-to-hand combat training. The second guard went down hard, his weapon skittering across the floor. Administrator Sylvain backed away, her tentacles lashing in agitation. You're only delaying the inevitable. Dr. Felnox has resources you can't imagine. This evidence will never see the light of day. Maybe not, Marcus said, breathing heavily from the fight. But it'll see the light of justice. Commander Thexal's voice echoed through the corridor as he arrived with a squad of loyal security officers. Administrator Sylvain, you are under arrest for conspiracy, attempted murder, and violation of the Galactic Bioweapons Treaty. As the security team secured Sylvain and her accomplices, Marcus turned to check on his companions. Everyone was shaken, but unharmed. Did we get it all? He asked Kala. The young Felinian nodded, clutching her data pad. Everything. Dr. Velnara's research, the Project Nightfall files, financial records showing payment transfers, communication logs between Felnox and Sylvain. Enough to prosecute everyone involved. 2 hours later, Marcus sat in Commander Thexal's office, watching news reports of Dr. Felnox's arrest at Epsilon 9. The evidence had been so overwhelming that even the normally corrupt neutral zone authorities had been forced to act. The Galactic Military Justice Division wants to offer you a position, Commander Thexal said. They're impressed with how you handled this situation. Marcus smiled tiredly. I appreciate the offer, but I think I'm done with military life. There's a private investigation firm on Earth that's been trying to recruit me. After today, I think I might give them a call. Kethvar entered the office, his scales now showing the lighter patterns of relief and gratitude. Marcus Chun, my people have asked me to extend an offer. The Vraxian government wants to establish a cross-species investigation unit. They want someone who understands that honor and justice transcend racial boundaries. What about you? Marcus asked. Your mother's killer has been brought to justice. What will you do now? Continue her work, Kethvar replied firmly. But legally this time, with proper oversight and transparency. Marcus stood up and extended his hand to the young Vraxian. Esikator was right about one thing. Honor does transcend species. Your mother would be proud of what you accomplished today. As they shook hands, Marcus reflected on the strange turn his day had taken. He'd come looking for a job and been rejected for lacking the right qualifications. Instead, he discovered that sometimes the most important qualifications couldn't be taught in school or learned from textbooks. Sometimes experience, integrity, and the willingness to do what's right were worth more than any degree. 3 weeks later, Marcus received a message from Galactic Solutions Incorporated. They wanted to offer him a position as head of their new ethics and compliance division. The irony wasn't lost on him, but he declined politely. He had already accepted the position with the Vraxian Cross-Species Investigation Unit. After all, he learned that the best interviews weren't about proving your qualifications to others. They were about proving your character to yourself. In less than 4 hours, they were running out of time, but they were also getting closer to the evidence they needed. Keep working, he told Kala. Everyone else, start gathering everything you can think of that might be useful: financial records, communication logs, personnel files, anything that shows the scope of this conspiracy. As the group dispersed to their tasks, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Someone knew what they were doing, and that someone would not want this information to reach the authorities. Tease what Project Nightfall was designed for: selective extermination of entire species. If we don't stop it here, it'll be used somewhere else, against someone else. Commander Thexal stepped forward. Kethvar, I give you my word as a Valdorian officer that we will preserve all evidence and ensure it reaches the appropriate authorities. My species has a saying: truth is the foundation of honor. Without truth, there is no honor. On the monitor, Kethvar slowly lowered his improvised weapon. I will trust you, Marcus Chun. But if you betray this trust, I won't, Marcus said simply. You have my word. Marcus read through the material. His expression grew darker. Project Nightfall was a weapons development program designed to create a virus that would target specific genetic markers found only in certain alien species. It was essentially a tool for genocide, disguised as defensive research. This is why our Vraxian friend is so upset, Marcus said quietly. According to these files, Vraxians were one of the primary target species for this bioweapon. Commander Thexal's crystalline skin paled. This cannot be. Galactic Solutions is a legitimate corporation. They would never. Look at the authorization codes. Marcus pointed to the bottom of each document. Every single one is signed off by Dr. Felnox. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. Dr. Felnox had been developing illegal bioweapons under cover of legitimate research. Somehow, the Vraxian had discovered this. Perhaps he was an undercover investigator, or maybe someone had leaked the information to him. But instead of going through official channels, he'd chosen direct action. Commander, I need to talk to the hostage-taker, Marcus said. Not as a negotiator, but as someone who understands what he's really fighting against. Why years in the military taught me to recognize the signs. If there's trouble, maybe I can help. The Zephyrian glanced around nervously, then leaned forward. There's been an incident in the high-security wing. 3 of our researchers have been taken hostage. The authorities are on their way, but... She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. The hostage-taker is demanding to speak with the company executives, but they're all in meetings off-planet. Marcus felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with crisis situations. This was what he was trained for. What do the authorities plan to do? They want to wait for the Galactic Peacekeepers' Special Response Team, but that could take hours. The hostage-taker seems unstable, and we're worried about the safety of our people. Marcus looked toward the elevators that led to the high-security wing. His interview was over, his chances at the job gone, but 3 lives were in danger. The decision was easy.